Okay guys, today we're going to talk about government versus politics, and specifically what is government and what does it do. Alright, the definition of government is the institution through which a society makes and enforces its public policies. And for that definition to make sense, you have to understand that public policies are the things that a government decides to do or not to do. So when we're talking about government, something you can think about is government is made up of people who can exert power and control over other people or an entire body of people. And that there are three basic powers that all governments share. Now, how those governments exercise these powers might be different. For example, in the United States, we have separation of powers, where those three powers are separated into different branches of government. For example, in a parliamentary system, the executive comes from the legislative branch. Okay? But in order to have a government, you must have legislative powers. With that, you also need executive powers, meaning that governments have to be able to carry out their laws and enforce the laws it creates. And finally, there's judicial powers within a government. Alright, so governments are able to execute power over the people or exercise power over the people. So, where do governments get that power? And that we'll discuss further in another lecture, but something you really need to think about, or something we're used to thinking about, is that a constitutional government, meaning that the government's power is derived from the people or the Constitution. So in a constitutional government, powers, procedures, and structures are all outlined by a constitution. Now you can have a written constitution, much like the United States has, where it's all housed in one document, or you can have something like an unwritten constitution where the guidelines for the government are made up in a number of different documents, not a single document. When we're talking about democratic governments, we know that the power is derived from the people. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about the idea of where power comes from and how governments came to have that power in another lecture. Alright, last thing we're going to talk about is the difference between politics and government. Often you hear those two terms described synonymously, or that is are interchangeably, so people often associate government with politics. When you're talking about the government, people will often tell you how much they hate politics. They are not the same thing, although they work very closely together. So government is a system of organization created by the Constitution. So government is all of the institutions and the structures that are created by a constitution. So government includes the system structures and processes that are in place to execute the authority and the power that a government might have over the law. So for example, our Constitution creates institutions like the presidency and the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Constitution only creates the Supreme Court. On the other hand, politics is a process. Okay? So remember that government institutes public policies. Politics are basically the method that government uses to achieve that ends. So politics are used to determine how the power and the resources will be divided. So basically what that means is politics is the means by which government is conducted. So if the Constitution creates a government with a legislative branch, politics is the process by which the laws are created. There are a number of tools of politics. For example, You often see negotiation and compromise. You might see the use of the media to achieve a political ends within government. Things we kind of associate with politics are the actual campaigns. The Constitution creates that Senate seat. Politics is used by individuals to gain the power of that Senate seat. So basically what we're also looking at with politics is it's a method of determining who gets the power and the resources. And when we talk about resources, we're talking about things like tax money, laws that will benefit a certain group of people, or a region of the country, or public policies that will benefit different groups of people. All right, so that is our first lecture on what is government and the difference between government and politics. All right, thank you.